Right, I think probably now is a good time to make a start. I'll introduce myself. My name's James Berry. I'm Head of Policy Research and Development at CoramBAAF. I'll be chairing this event today. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us today and to join us today for this webinar. I'll introduce the topic. So today is a lunch and learn about family finding and adoption assessment in relation to diversity and good practice. We're going to hear a presentation and there'll be an interactive element as well. And our presenter is Yoni Ejo, and I'll do a brief run through of her biography shortly. Just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So just welcome. It's great that you are here. We're really pleased that you're able to attend this exciting event. Can you please make sure that you silence your phone, that you turn on what should be turn on your camera. Please can you mute your microphone. If you can pop your name into the chat, that's really helpful. When I say pop your name into a chat, there's both sort of saying who you are, but it's also you can change in your settings. You can go into, there's some 3 dots usually, and it says rename, and if you can actually put your actual name, it's much easier to then sort of see who's actually in the room. If you do use the chat, please select to everyone in chat when using the chat, so that everyone can see who's talking. And just so that you know, the topics discussed today may include themes including racial trauma, so just to be conscious of that in this discussion. And please note that this session will be recorded. Just a thank you as well again for attending today. Presentation slides, certificates, and an evaluation link will be sent after the event. Just in terms of the sort of context of how this event has come around and why, there has been, ultimately CoramBAAF were commissioned to run a number of webinars on the theme of diversity and adoption by the RAA leaders. There is an ambition within the National Adoption Strategy to increase the number of people registering their interest in adoption and to target recruitment around the needs of those children waiting the longest and improve the quality and responsiveness of adoption support services so that they're supporting adoptive families in the best way possible. And so this webinar springs partly out of that national adoption strategy and the focus there. In terms of today, with this webinar, we're really privileged to be able to listen to Yoni Ejo. If you did attend a more recent webinar where just a month ago, where she discussed transracial adoption and some of the practice issues and challenges there, that was a fascinating and just incredibly powerful and important webinar. So we're really pleased that Yoni's back for a discussion today. In terms of Yoni herself, she's an adoption coach, a trainer, a social work manager, a social worker. She's worked in residential children's homes, she's worked in fostering, she's worked in child protection teams. She also has her own personal experiences around adoption, which she'll come to herself. And so on that note, I will introduce Yoni now and stop sharing my slides. So I'm really pleased that Yoni's here.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you. I'm going to share my screen. Fingers crossed it worked previously. Okay, so I'm really pleased to have the chance to talk to so many people who share my passion, which is around adoption. first of all, I should probably introduce myself, and you know, elaborate a little bit on James's kind introduction. I am, as he said, a qualified social worker, but perhaps more importantly than that, I myself was adopted. I was removed at birth when I was born as a response and a consequence of my birth mother not feeling able to care for me because I was a black baby. In part, that was she'd had, I think, 6 other children, none of whom lived with her, but that was her explanation at the time. And I was told that my birth father was an adopted, was a US American seaman. I subsequently sort of learned that that wasn't actually the case, that that she perhaps had said that as a sort of convenient explanation to local authority. I've done a DNA, which has given me a little bit of more information, because sadly I don't know anything about my birth father, and was really interested and perhaps a bit privileged to know that my heritage is probably about half European, also Ghana, Cameroon, Ireland, Scotland, Nigeria, Benin, and Mali. So a bit of an eclectic mix. In terms of what I do professionally, I am a social worker. I've worked, as James said, in child protection, in fostering, where most of my time has been spent, and also in a leaving care teams and a couple of leaving care teams. And I've really benefited from that experience, I think, because it's given me a different perspective. I think when we work in social work, we sometimes don't really think beyond 18.
Hi, Yoni. I'm not
Hi.
sure that you're sharing the right screen. I'm just double checking. Sorry to come back. It might be
Oh.
on the, if you go. It's it might be on the Zoom settings, which screen to share. Sorry to pause you like this.
No, that's okay. Can you see my slides now?
I think try sharing it again, and then hopefully that works.
Is that
okay? Let's try now.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you for letting me know. Yeah, sorry. Right. So yeah, I have worked in a leaving care team, and as I said, that I think gave me a real perspective on some of the things that we don't necessarily talk about in terms of preparing children and young people, and so I think that really sort of complemented my experience. I've been a fostering registered manager, and I now work with cared for children. I'm also a trustee of AKT, the LGBT Youth Homelessness Organisation, and New Family Social, which is a membership for LGBT adopters and foster carers. And I've recently been privileged to be invited to sit on the National Adoption Recruitment Group, and sort of bringing all my passions together, I guess, in terms of widening the pool of prospective adopters, the variety of adopters, and also the skills that adopters have, so that is me. I'm going to be talking to you about anti-racist work, because I think it's really important that we all take a anti-racist approach. And for me, why is it important that adopters and social workers become consciously anti-racist? Because in a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. And I think that's a really good stance to live by. And obviously that was from first coined by Angela Davis. Anti-racism is a really active thing. It's about being proactive, being informing yourself, about extending your knowledge and your experience, and putting that into practice. So no one is born racist or anti-racist. These results from choices that we make. Being anti-racist results from a conscious decision to make frequent, consistent, equitable choices daily. And those choices require ongoing self-awareness and self-reflection as we move through life. In the absence of making anti-racist choices, we unconsciously uphold aspects of white supremacy and white dominant culture and unequal institutions and society. Being racist or anti-racist is not about who you are, it's about what you do. And I think that's a really good overall sense, because I think it is important that when we do nothing, it's not a neutral act. It can actually be endorsing the status quo. And at this point, I just want to talk about a really helpful quote, I think, about white privilege and how we would describe it. And Emmanuel Acho is somebody, if you haven't come across him, he's well worth having a look on YouTube. Emmanuel Acho, A-C-H-O. He's talked a lot about race, and in a series of conversations called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And he talks about white privilege being immunity from punishment or access to something based on your skin color. I'm not saying you can't suffer, but your skin color does not contribute to life's difficulties. I think that's quite a helpful thing, because it's not about people feeling, and unfortunately we have cancel culture, which implies that people should be feeling guilty about situations that they're born into, and that's not what is being said at all. So first exercise that I would like you to do is called a circle of trust. Please, if you can get a piece of paper and write down the names of 10 people that you trust who are not part of your immediate family. So I'll give you a couple of minutes, just 10 people that you feel are trustworthy and people that are important to you. If people could maybe put in the chat, Don, and just to give us a little bit of an idea when you've finished. Yeah, okay. Sounds like people have done that. So you should have a list of up to 10 people who are people that you really trust. What I'd like you to do now is tick all of those on the list who are the same gender as you. And what you'll end up with is a line of ticks probably at the next to people's names. So if you've done that, tick all the members who share your ethnicity. Okay. Give me a shout if I'm going too fast. That's probably the best way to do this. And now if you can tick the people in that list who are, from your knowledge, share your sexuality or gender identity. Okay, and if you can tick those people who say share your cultural background, and that might be, you know, it's up to you how you define that really, but tick those who share your cultural background. And now tick those who are in a similar job role to yourselves, and I suppose I'm meaning social work, social care maybe, or however you want to define it. Okay, and tick those who either share a disability as you do or are non-disabled as you are. To have a similarity in terms of disability. Okay. And then finally, if tick those who are sort of roughly this, a similar age to yourself. And I guess, under 30 to 50, 50 plus is probably accurate enough. So you should have a list of people with a number of ticks next to it. What I'm going to ask you to do is we're going to break out into groups and just have a conversation really about, you can share as little or as much as you want about your own list. Obviously introduce yourselves and just have a conversation as to, are there some similarities? Are there quite a lot of similarities? Or, what does that tell you about the people who are most close to you? Okay. And I think it's a great exercise to sort of start make you think about some of the unconscious choices that we make that then impact in a very real world way. And sometimes that's also about becoming conscious of what isn't currently unconscious and then doing something about it. And unconscious bias is Unconscious bias is attitudes and stereotypes accumulated throughout our life that can influence our decision making, and particularly when something has to be decided quickly. So it's those snap judgments that we make when we meet somebody, when something goes wrong, perhaps when we make a decision under some element of stress. It creates a decision based on assumptions rather than on fact. And then I'm just going to talk about the 5 of the main types of unconscious bias, although I absolutely know that there are quite a lot of others, including beauty bias, which is interesting, that people who are perceived to be conventionally attractive have a disproportionate of goodwill through people that they meet. So there's a affinity bias, which leaves us to favour those people that we feel we have a connection or similarity with. This can, for example, be the same, attended the same college, growing up in the same town, or reminding us of somebody that we like or of ourselves. The halo effect is when one aspect of a person's personality or experience or something else colours our view of the person generally. So maybe they're another member of a club or have a qualification. And you can see this very played out in a very real way when people that we are very familiar with commit crimes or are sexually harmful, like Jimmy Savile, who a lot of people really struggled to believe that he was doing the things that he was doing because they recognized him and had good feelings about him. The horns effect is the direct opposite of the halo effect, and it's where perception is unduly influenced by one negative trait. So, for example, a person doesn't like somebody's clothes, they may assume that they're lazy or dirty. And for example, if we don't like the way somebody dresses in an interview, we may be less positively disposed towards them. Attribution bias is how we assess other people and their achievements. It can be particularly harmful in work settings. When we assess ourselves, we tend to think of our own achievements as our own work, while our failings are due to external factors. And when assessing other people, we think the diametric opposite, that achievements are luck and failings due to their personality. So we need to be really mindful when that happens, and how we assess people in a work context. And confirmation bias is when we have the tendency to search for, interpret and focus on and remember information that agrees with our own views or preconceived ideas. And that's what I think makes social media quite problematic, because the algorithms will send you more of what you think already, and will be impacted on what you search for. And so it can give a very distorted view of the world. And I think we're seeing that played out in some of the politics going on at the moment. I have put a link, which I will, can I ask one of my colleagues to maybe put that in the chat? It's Harvard, the university, do studies on biases, and if you go into that link, you will find a number of tests for a variety of biases. There's gender, there's disability, there's race, and there's a number of others. And so they use that information for their research purposes. But I think if you're doing an assessment, it is a very good idea to maybe have people do that bias. And it's not about a right or wrong answer. It's actually about well, if that's your bias, what are we going to do to sort of ameliorate and manage the impacts of those biases? Okay. So what I'd like you to do is to sort of think about where some of those biases might come from, and I'm just conscious of time, so I think I'm going to share. Obviously, family attitudes is a big one, and there was a study of people who'd left the neo-Nazis or radicalization, and it indicated that I think 40% of them had grown up in a family who had those attitudes, the racist attitudes. And so once that's set, then people can sort of continue with that mindset. And growing up where you grow up, community impacts, and certainly media and stereotypes can create those biases. And it's interesting that even now, certain people, say in the criminal justice system, might be treated differently because of some of those biases. And I think we've got lots of evidence to say that that it impacts on health, on social care, on criminal justice. Less clear how we resolve that, but I think the first step is to be conscious about it. This, I think, is a slide that I think is quite powerful in terms of when children recognize race. So at 3 months, babies look at more at faces that match the race of their caregivers. So they're already making a distinction through race from their caregiver and other people. Children as young as 2 years old use race to reason about people's behaviours. By 30 months, most children use race to choose their playmates. And expressions of racial prejudice often peak at the ages of 4 and 5. By 5, white children are strongly biased in favour of whiteness and have learnt to associate some groups with higher status than others. And 6+, explicit conversations with 5 to 7-year-olds about interracial friendships can dramatically improve their racial attitudes. So I think when people say, no, this child is too young to be talking about race or discrimination, then I think that's some really good studies to suggest that actually there's no time that is too soon. So what are the implications of that? I think there's different communities that have different attitudes, which then are reflected in how we manage and approach adoption. So in different communities, they have different attitudes towards adoption. Trying to move something so I can read my slides. In Chinese communities, adoption has previously been taboo. Leaving a blood heir was of critical importance, and families who took in a stranger's child often took pains to hide the fact that they were not blood related. Over time, more recently, the stigma is easing, particularly in Hong Kong, and in China, the government is starting to publicize adoption in official newspapers to encourage families to undertake adoption and consider it. South Africa and Nigeria, there's a poor attitude to adoption, even though amongst infertile couples, an intervention needs to be created to educate communities and make it more accessible, and adoption is increasing. My partner is Ghanaian, and I spent quite a bit of time in Ghana, and they also don't have any history of adoption or fostering. Most of the children are cared for in orphanages run by house mothers. But I think people are starting to recognise that this is something that they can be increasing. Sikhisms, they identify that it's not inherited, it's where a genetic relationship is required, so adoption's a personal choice, and they consider it adoption as a good deed. There's a requirement to preach the message of Sikhism to the child so that they can make a choice when they're an adult, but my understanding isn't that that means imposing it, it's about giving them the choice. And then Muslim countries, of all countries, only Morocco has an adoption or fostering system. Adoption in its legal form is prohibited in Islam, but rules allow people to support needy children as long as they don't grant them any legal obligations such as inheritance. But I know that there is, and if people are assessing somebody who is Muslim, there is a really good organisation that works specifically with Muslim adopters and foster carers, sorry, which is certainly worth making contact with. And in Pakistan, 1 in 5 couples have a fertility issue, so there is an increasing interest in adoption. Right, we've come to a video that I think is quite a useful contribution. She's an adoption, she works in adoption and is also an adopter, and talks about what people need to think about when considering transracial adoption. So I will stop sharing. Oh,
And
okay.
I'll just suggest you try and turn up your sound as much as you can on your laptop, as it's a little bit of a quiet video, just so you know.
When we work with families who are considering what we call transracial adoption, what we want to ask them to do is look at 4 areas of their life. The first is personality issues. Are you the kind of person that likes to juggle a lot of balls in the air at once? Or do you like things to be in a straight and narrow? Are you the kind of person that can handle being in the public eye? Are you the kind of person who's a joiner? Or do you not? I'm the kind of person who hates to look at a computer manual. I'd spend hours trying to figure out how to do it rather than look at that manual. That is not a good asset for a transracial parent, because guess what, folks? I need to ask questions. I need to get help. So we want to start there. We go next to attitude. Do you believe that there is no racism in the world? And if you do, are you prepared to learn differently? Are you prepared to reach out and find out what people of color think about whether there's racism? Are you prepared to understand that your child's experience is not going to be the same as yours? If there is nothing else I try to teach potential adopters, it is to shift their focus and understand that their experience and their child's experience are going to be different. Lifestyle issues. Where do I live? And when I talk to families, very often they'll talk about, oh, but I know lots of people of color. Well, where do you know them? Oh, well, like I work with a lot of people of color. So how many of us bring our 3-year-olds to work with us on a daily basis? What I'm talking about is in our intimate lives. And I break that down usually: who do I dinner with and who do I worship with? Who do I love? Who do I know? Our children need to see us loving people that look like them in an intimate way. If you don't already have those relationships, you need to start yesterday in creating those relationships, because your child's lifeblood depends on them. We all need mentors. We all need people we can look up to that are like us, so that we can believe we can become functional, healthy adults. The 4th issue is knowledge. People, particularly those who culture or communities that are targeted, which all communities of color are targeted. Targeted communities in particular utilize their history, their internal history, to feel strong, to combat racism, so that, racism is a deadly force. And what we have to do with children is help them learn that they do not have to be victim to racism, that they can push it aside. And part of the way they push it aside is by understanding the rich, powerful legacy that they come from. So, for instance, if I've adopted from China, there is a powerful, powerful history and legacy there. great many things to be so proud of, to embrace. Our Chinese adoptees, Chinese people, own that legacy. If I'm a white parent, I have to help that child own their legacy, which means they have to know about it. So we have to be able to give them that. So those are the 4 issues: personality, attitude, lifestyle, and knowledge.
Thank you. Do I need to share my screen? I think if for those who couldn't hear, perhaps if somebody could put the link in the chat. And then you can watch it later. Can you see my PowerPoint? Okay, thank you. So where does that take us in terms of adopting and how to help adopters prepare to adopt? I think it's so important to help them challenge their unconscious bias, understand the development of a child's racial identity, to encourage them to work on themselves, and as professionals to work on ourselves, our triggers, understanding of race, and being willing to talk about race in a real way and in an accessible way, and encouraging prospective adopters to research the child's heritage. And that's, you know, and they're going to be reliant on us as professionals to get accurate information about the children that we are asking them to care for, so that they can understand their heritage as fully as possible. And sometimes that's about asking difficult questions of birth families at a time that is challenging. But I think it's so important, because you actually only have potentially some people only have one opportunity to do that. To learn, don't ask black people to educate you. Put yourself in, sorry about the spelling, put yourself in spaces where you're in the minority. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes aid learning. And something that I'm very mindful of is that children who experience trauma can be very afraid of making mistakes, because the consequences at home were disproportionate to make mistakes. So I think it's really important that we are encourage our adopters to bring them up in a learning and in a expanding mindset, where they're okay to make mistakes, and they get rewarded for trying. Be ready to be challenged. Encouraging a nurturing environment, creating a safe space for the child, creating a nurturing family, being an advocate for the child, and particularly around child's hair and skin care, emotional identity, and medical needs. My mum, I think, was quite intimidated by my hair, because she didn't understand it and didn't know what things to use. And she would have benefited from more information at an earlier stage. Parenting a confident child, helping them to understand the impact of racism, keeping talking about race, building a lasting and authentic friendships with people of colour, and extending your network. And it's worth maybe doing that exercise with adopters, and then talking about how, if they are considering transracially adopting, how can they extend their network? Because if children and young people don't see people who look like them who are important to you, then or to the adopter, then how confident are they going to be that they will continue to be important? And lastly, I think something that comes up time and time again in the views of adopters and also adoptees is contributing, seeing that adopters contribute, supporting people of colour organisations, being actively anti-racist, providing a role model for your child in supporting diverse communities, groups or clubs, developing activities to promote child's knowledge of their own heritage, and to be an active anti-racist role model for your child. I think it's interesting that they've adoptees particularly said, you know, we want to see our adopters invest in the Black community with their time, money or other support. And it might be that, you know, when you are ordering or the adopters are asking for work to be done, then is there a Black practitioner that can do it, so that young people can see not just the media stereotypes of people who look like them, but people who are in situations and positions of power. So I think it's important, as I said, to talk about race, approach the conversation not knowing all the answers and being comfortable about being uncomfortable, because it's not easy to talk about race in whatever context. Research what you don't know on and offline, understanding white privilege like we talked about, and creating a safe space. What you will get in the papers is an adoption assessment tool that I've created that I'm hoping that you might use and give me some feedback on. And it's really taking you through some of the conversations that we've had today about unconscious bias. It's got a link to the assessment, and then some questions to encourage the prospective adopter or foster carer or special guardian to evaluate some of their unconscious biases. What does it tell them about themselves? What will you do to change in your adoption journey as a result? And then what sorts of strategies are they going to do? What are they going to put in place? What are the things that might encourage talking or opportunities to have these sorts of conversations? And I'm more and more, and I wish I did this when I adopted, that I wish that we'd created a family meal together where we would have that opportunity to talk about things, and I think, you know, in the hubbub of modern life, we perhaps don't sit down as families and share experiences, and I think that's something that if adopters don't do that, which they might, it might not be quite as formal without children. When they do have children, that to have that sort of scoped out space where everyone knows that we're going to have an opportunity to share, and for them to develop strategies about what they think that they need to know, what are the gaps in their knowledge, what resources might they find useful, and also to evaluate what they've learned from that. I think it's really important to create a long-term appetite for learning. It's not just about getting through the panel, it's about expanding their knowledge, because I think that, in my experience, the most successful carers have been the ones who have recognised a child's needs, whatever that might be, gone off, researched it, looked at what the resources are, and formulated a plan. Not the ones who are trying to change the child to bend into what is going to work in their family. And that's quite a different mindset, a growth mindset. How are they going to plan to nurture their child? What sort of family traditions might work well? And that might be a combination of, if there's two of them, of both parties, and how they're going to parent a confident Black child and contribute to Black communities. So it's some of the same things that I've talked about today, but working that through with your adopter. And the last thing is for them to answer the question, or continue the sentence. I specifically feel I will be successful caring for a Black child or transracially because, and what are they offering? And if you can get them to do all of that, then I think it will make your assessment much more rich. It will get them to think about it in more depth, because I think there's a tendency, and I've sat on lots of panels where you sort of think, we'll talk about the same things, like, yes, I'll make sure that they've got some books and I'll make sure that there's some reflective pictures on the wall, but it's much bigger and broader than that. In terms of sort of what I do, I'm having a bit of a problem. I provide quite a few different services to adopters, and when I say adopters, I concentrate on adopters because it then enables me to talk to one group of people, but that is not at all excluding foster carers or special guardianships. Carers, I think they can all benefit from some of the work that I'm doing. I provide a membership for adopters and carers, which has got quite a lot of training within it. Relationship-based play, which is a training that I did with a play therapist on how to scope out some time using play to build attachment and build the child's confidence. I've got yoga and understanding trauma using music courses, and what we'll do is I'll put my direct email in the chat, and if anyone wants to talk to me about other things that I provide, then I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. And as I say, I'm an adoption coach, so I do one-to-ones with both professionals and adopters.